We're live. Good morning. I am Pastor David Stammer John, First Presbyterian Church in Martins Ferry, and we are excited to offer a new approach to a vacation Bible school. We love vacation Bible school, but in this season of pandemic, we just cannot bring a group of children together for that purpose. And so we thought we'd approach our vacation Bible school in a new way. And we're looking forward to this summer together, 10 o'clock every weekday. We will be reading each day a chapter of the Chronicles of Narnia, the first book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The book's by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis wrote the Chronicles of Narnia for his grandchildren. And he wrote them as a Christian fairy tale to tell the story of Christ in a story form. And so we thought that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe would be a great starting point each day of the week, each day of this week at 10 o'clock. I will be your reader. Next week we will have a different reader. And we hope that you'll join us either at this 10 o'clock time or at a time that you want. You can find us on Facebook at First Presbyterian Church of Martins Ferry at our page, or you can find us on YouTube at the First Presbyterian Church of Martins Ferry. So do join us. Join us each day if you can at this time or at another time. And if you have a question as we read, you can text that message into the Facebook page or into YouTube, and we'll be able to try to respond to those questions. We're looking forward to this. This should be a fun time. It's a different way of doing Vacation Bible School, but we do hope you enjoy this time with C.S. Lewis' book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Let's begin with chapter 1. Lucy looks into the wardrobe. Once there were 4 children whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. This story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war because of the air raids. They were sent to the house of an old professor who lived in the heart of the country, 10 miles from the nearest railway station and 2 miles from the nearest post office. He had no wife, and he lived in a very large house with a housekeeper called Mrs. Macready and 3 servants. Their names were Ivy, Margaret, and Betty, but they do not come into the story much. He himself was a very old man with a shaggy white hair which grew over most of his face as well as on his head, and they liked him almost at once. But on the first evening, when he came out to meet them at the front door, he was so odd-looking that Lucy, who was the youngest, was a little afraid of him. And Edmund, who was the next youngest, wanted to laugh and had to keep on pretending he was blowing his nose to hide it. As soon as they had said good night to the professor and gone upstairs on the first night, the boys came into the girls' room and they talked it over. "We've fallen on our feet, and no mistake," said Peter. This is going to be perfectly splendid. That old chap will let us do anything we like." "I think he's an old dear," said Susan. "Oh, come off it," said Edmund, who was tired and pretending not to be tired, which always made him bad-tempered. "Don't go on talking like that." "Like what?" said Susan. "And anyway, it's time you were in bed." "Trying to talk like mother," said Edmund. "And who are you to say I'm to go to bed? Go to bed yourself." "Hadn't we all better go to bed?" said Lucy. "There's sure to be a row. There's sure to be a problem. If we're heard talking here." "No, there won't," said Peter. "I tell you, this sort of house where no one's going to mind what we do. Anyway, they won't hear us. It's about 10 minutes' walk from here down to the dining room, and any amount of stairs and passages in between." "What's that noise?" said Lucy suddenly. It was a far larger house than she had ever been in before, and the thought of all those long passages and rows of doors leading into empty rooms was beginning to make her feel a little creepy. "It's only a bird, silly," said Edmund. "It's an owl," said Peter. "This is going to be a wonderful place for birds. I shall go to bed now. I say, let's go and explore tomorrow. You might find anything in a place like this. Did you see those mountains as we came along? And the woods? There might be eagles. There might be stags. Stags are deer. There'll be hawks. Badgers," said Lucy. "Foxes," said Edmund. "Rabbits," said Susan. But when next morning came, there was a steady rain falling, so thick that when you look out the window, you could see neither the mountains, nor the woods, nor even the stream in the garden. "Of course it would be raining," said Edmund. They had just finished their breakfast with the professor, and were upstairs in the room he had set apart for them, a long, low room with 2 windows looking out in one direction and 2 in another. "Don't stop grumbling, Ed," said Susan. 10 to 1, it'll keep up. It will clear up in an hour or so. And in the meantime, we're pretty well off. There's a wireless, a radio, and lots of books." "Not for me," said Peter. "I'm going to explore in the house." Everyone agreed to do this, and that was how the adventures began. It was the sort of house that you never seemed to come to the end of. It was full of unexpected places. The first few doors they tried led only to spare bedrooms. I've never been in a house that had spare bedrooms like that. Have you? The first few doors they tried only led into spare bedrooms, as everyone had expected that they would. But soon they came to a very long room full of pictures, and there they found a suit of armor. And after that was a room all hung with green, with a harp in one corner. And then came 3 steps down and 5 steps up. That's peculiar. And then a kind of little upstairs hall, and a door that led out onto a balcony, and then a whole series of rooms that led into each other and were lined with books, most of them very old books, and some bigger than a Bible in a church. And shortly after that, they looked into a room that was quite empty, except for one big wardrobe, the sort that has a looking glass in the door. There was nothing else in the room at all except a dead blue bottle on the windowsill. What's a wardrobe? Do you know what a wardrobe is? A wardrobe is kind of like a big piece of furniture that you use for a closet. So you hang clothes and coats in the wardrobe, but it's a big piece of furniture with doors that you can close and looks very nice. So there they saw the wardrobe. Let's go on. Nothing there, said Peter, and they all trooped out again, all except Lucy. She stayed behind because she thought it would be worthwhile trying the door of the wardrobe, even though she felt almost sure that it would be locked. To her surprise, it opened quite easily, and 2 mothballs dropped out. Looking into the inside, she saw several coats hanging up, mostly long fur coats. There was nothing Lucy liked so much as the smell and feel of fur. Have you ever felt a fur coat? Oh, it is nice. She immediately stepped into the wardrobe and got in among the coats and rubbed her face against them, leaving the door open, of course, because she knew that it's very foolish to shut oneself in any wardrobe. It certainly would be. Soon, she went further in and found there was a second row of coats hanging up behind the first one. It was almost quite dark in there, and she kept her arms stretched out in front of her so as not to bump her face into the back of the wardrobe. She took a step further in, then 2 or 3 steps, always expecting to feel woodwork against the tips of her fingers, but she could not feel it. This must be a simply enormous wardrobe, thought Lucy, going still further in, pushing the soft folds of the coat aside to make room for her. Then she noticed there was something crunching under her feet. What do you think it might be? I wonder, is that more mothballs, she thought, stooping down to feel it in her hand. But instead of feeling the hard, smooth wood of the floor of the wardrobe, she felt something soft and powdery and extremely cold. This is quite queer, she said, and went 1 step or 2 further. Next moment, she found that she was rubbing against her face and hands was no longer soft fur, but something hard and rough and even prickly. Why, it's just like branches of a tree, she exclaimed. And then she saw that there was light ahead of her. Not a few inches away, where the back of the wardrobe ought to have been, but a long way off. Something cold and soft was falling on her. A moment later, she found that she was standing in the middle of a wood at nighttime with snow under her feet and snowflakes falling through the air. That is peculiar. Lucy felt a little frightened, but she felt very inquisitive and excited as well. She looked back over her shoulder, and there, between the dark tree trunks, She could still see the open doorway of the wardrobe and even catch a glimpse of the empty room from which she had been out. She had, of course, left the door open, for she knew that it is very silly to shut oneself into a wardrobe. It seemed to still be daylight there. I can always get back if anything goes wrong, thought Lucy. She began to walk forward. Crunch, crunch, over the snow and through the wood toward the other light. In about 10 minutes, she reached it and found it was a lamp post. As she stood there looking at it, wondering why there was a lamp post in the middle of a wood, and wondering what to do next. Why do you think there might be a lamp post in the middle of the wood? And most peculiar wood, right outside the house, through the wardrobe, and it's snowing. Well, let's go on. She heard a pitter-patter of feet coming toward her. And soon after that, a very strange person stepped out from among the trees into the light of the lamppost. He was only a little taller than Lucy himself, and he carried over his head an umbrella, white with snow. From the waist upward, he was like a man, but his legs were shaped like a goat's. The hair on them was glossy black, and instead of feet, he had goat hoofs. He also had a tail. But Lucy did not notice this at first because he was neatly caught up over the arm that held the umbrella so that as to keep it from trailing in the snow. He had a red woolen muffler around his neck, a scarf around his neck, and his skin was rather reddish too. That is peculiar, isn't it? He had a strange but pleasant little face, and with a short pointed beard and curly hair, and out of the hair stuck 2 horns, one on each side of his forehead. One of his hands, as I said, held the umbrella, and in the other arm he carried several brown paper parcels. What with the parcels and the snow, it looked just as if he had been doing his Christmas shopping. He was a faun. And when he saw Lucy, he gave such a start of surprise that he dropped all his parcels. "Goodness gracious me," exclaimed the faun. Well, that's the end of chapter 1 of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Lucy has gone through the wardrobe. Remember, a wardrobe is like a closet, but it's a piece of furniture. And so it has doors. You open it, and you reach in and you hang up clothing inside the wardrobe. But Lucy walked through the wardrobe, deeper and deeper through the wardrobe, until she came to a wood where it was snowing. And there was a lamppost. And she met this faun carrying packages and an umbrella. The faun wearing a scarf around his neck. Why do you think this fawn. What? That's a peculiar creature, and I've never seen something like that. Have you? I don't think so. So it's a most peculiar place that Lucy has entered. Well, we'll continue our reading tomorrow with chapter 2. I thank you for joining us. Join us again.